All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City Council for April 4th, 2022. First order of business is invocation and pledge of allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to come together, Lord, and to do the people's business. We ask today for your wisdom as we seek to make the decisions that serve our community best. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to approval of the March 21st regular meeting minutes. You all have received a copy of that. If there's no discussion, I entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
I've got a motion, second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, yes?
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next order of business is public comment, and we do have a couple public comment cards. So I'll just go down the list in the way we've got them. When you come up, you have 3 minutes, and if you could please state by saying your name and address, please. And this is in the order that they were received. First up, Mr. McManus. Come on down. Name and address for the record, sir.
Do what I hear you.
Name and address for the record.
Kerry McManus, 13 Ophelia Drive. Hello, my name's Kerry McManus. I live at 13 Ophelia Drive. I've lived here for 19 years. By now, I'm sure everyone on this board is aware of this issue of multiple boxes from Comcast Cable in all different locations of people's yards. Some are round and 2 foot tall, some are square, over 3 foot tall, 3 foot wide, and 3 foot long. From what I understand, we don't currently have an active agreement with them, and they do not believe they need one, as they have some authorizations that are statewide. Nevertheless, I do believe they are subject to our codes regarding underground utilities, and there is apparently some disagreement regarding the feasibility and placing of these facilities underground. I understand we have certain exemptions for telephone pedestals and similar equipment in the city. If this is true, we have a mayor, we have a board, we have police, we have citizens. Why don't we stop them today until our lawyers, our board, and our mayor can talk to them and fix this issue? They're putting these in super fast, and I do believe that's probably the reason, because they're afraid that we're going to do something like this. We do have certain rules and regulations on equipments going underground. They're digging up places. They're supposed to put them back to original way, laying ryegrass, seed, and putting hay over them is not going back to the way they were before. It's not satisfactory. Some locations, they've laid a few pieces of grass and left tall mounds of dirt, like at 68 Pin Oak Loop. The more that goes into, the more complaints that are probably going to happen. It's just probably going to get worse from here on when people wake up and they see this huge 3 foot box square in their front yard. Pin Oak Loop has 27 green boxes on one street. Every other house has a box. Southland Court across the street, the duplexes over there, tiny street. The street has 12 boxes. Leisure Wood neighborhood has 37, every other house. Ridgeview Lane has AT&T. They have 2 on the whole street, and I had to look for them. I've had high-speed internet in my house, and I've had it for several years. There's no boxes on my whole street. You go down Ophelia Drive, all you see is mailboxes, kids playing in beautiful yards, except now, Mr. Bill Yarble's front yard, they put in a huge 4 foot tall box on concrete with wires sticking out of it, which he's actually backed into now already. We don't want this in our neighborhood. The other concerns that I have, as you know, some of you know, my house is flooded 3 or 4 times. The city has spent thousands of dollars on tearing this road up right behind us and putting in drains in front of my house and in my backyard. They're drilling through that. The city engineers had to use laser beams to grade the ground to make sure the water flows the right way. If they go through there and they tear that up and mound dirt up and stuff, what's going to make my house not flood again? I lost my place. I got to rambling. I'm sorry. Anyways, that's really basically all I got to say. But like, here's the demo of these boxes. This big one right here, it's actually about this high up off the ground in front of people's houses. I did find out on Pin Oak Loop, there's a guy that's got an RV, a guy that's got a landscape trailer, and another guy, he's got just, I don't know what it is. It looks like a homemade camper. Now they can't park them on the side of their houses to be up to code because they can't get their trailers and trucks to back in. If they do, they'll run over this one right here. Brandon Gregory lives across the street from my brother-in-law on Pin Oak Loop, across the street from 68 Pin Oak Loop, and he asked them, they had one dead square in the middle of his yard. He said, guys, can y'all please move this 10 foot over? And they said, no. He said, I'll buy you a case of beer. Guess what happened? They moved it. So they can move them. So, my issue is, go drive down my street on Ophelia Drive. We don't have no boxes like this at all, nothing. I still have an AT&T box and the very first cable company that was here abandoned in my backyard. So if these guys leave, we're gonna have these abandoned. So I say no to these. I think we need to stop them. They're right across the street from my house right now. They're ready to come back there. I don't wanna let them in my yard. I don't wanna let them in my neighbor's yard. I don't wanna let them in anybody's yard. I just hope you guys can figure something out and work something with them to where we can get them underground, because the water company just did two brand new pumps or water mains, and they moved them 5 feet up, and they're underground and they're big, right in front of my house. So I don't see why they can't do the same thing. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up is Marie Poff. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Marie Poff. I live at 107 Highland Point Cove, just across the street from here. So far, they have not put any of these hideous boxes into our yards, but our yards are already small. And for example, my yard is flat, and all the neighborhood kids come in and play soccer and different things in my yard. So, like, if we did put, a box like this in my yard, the kids wouldn't be able to play. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And again, the water meters and everything are underground, they're flush with the yard, so there's no issues. So if Comcast could put these underground, that would be fine with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Megan Griffith. Come on down, you're the next contestant.
I'm Megan Griffith. I live at 116 Lake Valley Drive. I'm just also coming to say that I'm opposed to this being put in our yard. I just am wanting to explore or help explore or hear if you're exploring any alternatives to this, if they truly are able to put these in every other yard. Our yard has just recently been marked on Lake Valley. And I just know my husband puts a lot of time and has spent a lot of money on our yard to make it look a certain way, and we would like it to stay where we can actually sell our house at some point if we ever choose to move, which we would move somewhere else in Maumel, just so y'all know. And so I just wanted to say that I think I actually drove around a little bit looking at what we already have in place, and there's actually already a lot of boxes between a lot of people's yards. And at what point does it become too much? At what point do people look at homes and be like, I don't want to live in that one, and our property values decrease? So that's all I have to say. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next up is David Gesser? Chesser. I can't read, so we make a good team.
I can't. My last name begins with a C, and I can't draw a C. It's David Chesser, 18 Riverwood Place. First of all, I want to thank you for giving us a voice. Secondly, I want to thank you for starting this assembly with a prayer and a pledge of allegiance. It's very encouraging. Thank you. Well, I heard about this. My wife saw it on Facebook. I drove around one of the neighborhoods where these are, and I saw them in every other yard, or at least every third yard, and a half a dozen big ones on one loop. And I just don't understand. I appreciate Maumel having buried utilities and the aesthetic that's considered in burying utilities. These are not buried, and they're ugly. They're just bright green, and they stand out. I'm used to boxes. I have a big box in my front yard. I have a telephone pedestal in my backyard. You get used to them, and it's going to be hard to get used to. My question is this going in all neighborhoods? Are all neighborhoods in Maumel going to look like where these are currently installed?
I don't know. They haven't applied for permits for all of Maumel.
Okay, that's my concern, because we don't have that ugly stuff yet. We have the old dark green, which is bad enough, but it's dark green, it's not this ugly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Michael Tippin.
Good evening. Mike Tippin, 24 Sand Trap Drive. Mayor and members of the council, thank you for what you do and for taking the time to hear us. I'm going to quote a couple of ordinances y'all probably know very well. I hope you'll bear with me as I try to make a point. City Ordinance 38.1 states that a nuisance means any person permitting any condition or thing to exist which is offensive to the senses or tends to depreciate the value of the property of others. By direct observation and based upon public comments I've seen on social media, the placement of these large boxes is offensive to the senses and will likely contribute to the depreciation of property values. I've seen comments of someone who's considering buying a house. They saw one of those boxes in the yard and said, nope, I'm not gonna buy it, drove right on by. So I hope that y'all will bear that in mind when you're addressing this issue. I was driving down Arnold Palmer today, and I was looking at the location of the existing utility boxes, like for electric and different ones, including the large ones. Every one that I saw was placed at a bit of unused land, or where there might be a little valley. I didn't really see any of them that were placed in the middle of someone's yard. So I think that with a little consideration, whoever's placing these boxes, the utilities, can work to, the ones that they do have to put in, make them look nice. For example, these here, one of these a block or something might not be unreasonable, just like the electrical ones have to be in, if they have to be in at all. But putting these, or one or two of these in every yard, I used to work in telecommunications, I used to run fiber like this. And I know that we can absolutely run it underground. It's not necessary. I don't know if it's because they've already bought a bunch of these or for their convenience. But in my opinion, they should have to bear the responsibility of putting these underground, just like the water lines, if there's gonna be that many. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Jonathan Lamb. Name and address for the record, sir.
Jonathan Lamb, 123 Beaver Creek Lane. My question is, who's keeping control of the code where it's coming outside of our easement area, it's coming on personal property area? Who's taking control of making sure it's in the easement area? The second question is, who's helping making this discretionary versus right in the middle of our plot of land?
So if you have an issue with one of these outside of the easement area, or you suspect it is, go ahead and call 851-2500. You could talk to Scott Grummer in our planning and permits department. He and his team have been working pretty diligently to keep those issues from arising or correcting them once we're there. Pardon me, what was your second?
Second question, who's making this discretionary? Instead of having a piece of equipment in our middle of a yard, why isn't it with the rest of our utilities?
Again, if there's any in the center of someone's yard, please let us know, and we'll go out. They shouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that something that I just need to refer back to y'all if it's right there in the middle because I already have it?
Well, there's 100 ways to do it. The two easiest would be to call Scott or City
Okay.
Hall and just ask, who do you talk to? Second of all, you can use C-Click Fix if you've got that app. Just take a picture of it, it geolocates. Mr. McManus can show you how to use it if you don't know.
Perfect.
And the pictures are actually really helpful because it helps us know exactly which box. But either way, they shouldn't be putting them in folks' front yard at all. I haven't seen any. I've heard of some, and I know that Mr. Grummer's team has worked when we've had those sort of incidents pop up.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, that concludes public comment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
as long as we're on the subject, can I ask you a couple of questions about
Certainly.
that? You mentioned something about a permit for them to be putting this in. Is this something they have to, a permit for excavation or something like that?
There is a permit. I'm not sure if it's an excavation permit. It is.
Okay, is that something we can deny until we work something out with them?
Can you deny a permit? Yes. Can you do it lawfully? That would be a question I'd ask the city attorney.
I mean, y'all do it lawfully on us,
So, I just want to give everyone a little bit of background. At one time, we did have a franchise agreement active with Comcast. That was back in, I think we initially entered into it back in 2017. It was for 4 years. So last year, we worked on some negotiations for a new one. Unfortunately, we were not able to come to an agreement, so we don't have a franchise agreement that's active with them right now. Just for your information, in that prior agreement, it does discuss underground construction of utilities and states, nothing in this section shall be construed to require the company to construct, operate, or maintain underground any ground-mounted appurtenances such as customer taps, which I think is what that is, but I wouldn't swear to it, line extenders, system passive devices, amplifiers, power supplies, pedestals, or other related equipment. So that's our prior agreement with them. That these facilities, and I think we were of the understanding at that time, although I was not here at that time, that it was not possible technologically for them to have those facilities constructed underground. So in the interest of trying to give people options for internet providers, cable providers, then that was part of the agreement at that time. Again, I don't know, I did not negotiate that one, but that's how I understand it. Since then, they've kind of continued with that. I had a number of changes that I wanted them to make to their franchise agreement when we began negotiating this back in, I think it was July and August of last year. I had conference calls. Of course, some of this was during the time of COVID, and I'm talking to their representative who's at their house, with their dog, and it's a little bit not the ideal situation. But they were not willing to concede on any of the things that I felt strongly about. For example, they want a 10-year franchise agreement with these same provisions in it on above-ground structures and all of the provisions. I think 10 years is too long. Technology changes a lot in 5 years, so I wasn't willing to sign for more than 5 years. They also didn't want to agree that they relocate, which is similar to the issues that we've had with Entergy. They wanted to have the same terms as all other utility providers so that if we don't, for some reason, require Entergy to pay for relocation for an expansion of a street, they would not be required to pay for that relocation either. We would have to reimburse them for the relocation. There were a number, probably a dozen changes that I wanted to their agreement. They would not agree to them. We went back and forth. I last checked with our representative there in October of last year and said, hey, just have not heard anything from you. This was at the end of October. She told me they were having a lot of challenges with their team at that time and that they would get back with me to set up another meeting. That's the last that I've heard from them. So one of the things that, just to also give you some information about state law, that in their government liaison who was negotiating and discussing these things with me, although not really negotiating, but was discussing these things with me, mentioned is that the Arkansas Video Services Act, which is found at 2319-201 and following, they are registered with the Secretary of State as a, they have a certificate of franchise authority through the Secretary of State's office. 2319-205 gives them some rights to use public rights of way of a political subdivision, which we are. And so they tend to take the position that they don't really have to have a franchise agreement with us. They can proceed under state law. Now that statute does have some, there's some restrictions on that, and it says that this subchapter does not exempt a video service provider from compliance with all lawful political subdivision land use regulations, including without limitation zoning laws, building permit requirements, pole attachment agreements, street cut permits, and other permits required for the use of a political subdivision's right-of-way. So they are subject to our code sections and our restrictions to at least a certain extent. Again, we've also been in this permitting process, I think, last year, and when this all began, operating under the assumption that this was not something that could be placed underground, and that may affect how we interpret our code going forward, if that is feasible for them to be able to do that. But, I mean, that's just, hopefully that at least gives you some background information on how we got where we are now.
Thank you. Councilmember Holt?
This has certainly been a point of discussion in my neighborhood. I have a gentleman that lives across the street and a couple of houses down. His was put in the middle of the yard. He called in or got online, and online it said that the easement was 25 foot, so he talked to our people, and they said, no, it's 32 foot, but it was in the middle of the yard, in a location where he wanted to place sort of a driveway, and he couldn't do anything with it. So nonetheless, he got it, somehow or another, he got it put underground. It is not above ground at this point. Another neighbor is at the end of the line of everything that comes along, and this will be the fourth time that he will have to resod that part of the yard. He said he's just getting tired of redoing it, and he used the phraseology that he said they use very poor grass when they redo it anyway. So the one that's between is like the little tall one there. It's between my house and the house next door. But it seems to me that the company just worked at their own discretion, whatever the easiest path was, and they didn't pay much attention to it. It is what it is, and it's regretful that we've gotten this far, and now it's very difficult to turn around and do anything else about it. We're just sort of, it is what it is. I don't know, we did not vote on this. This is not something that we had control over. Is that?
So in 2017, the agreement that the city entered into at that time, there was an ordinance and you did vote on that agreement. However, that agreement has expired and we have not been able to reach consensus on a good new agreement, and so there's been no ordinance to send to you.
Okay. Well, if there's anything that can be done in any way to ease the frustration of our residents, I would hope that our city code enforcement and planning commission or whoever else can be involved would look into it and see what if there is anything that can be done. May not be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Shin?
I just wondered what has changed since 17 that they needed a franchise agreement and now they don't. Did the state law change in that period of time?
They still say that they would like to have an agreement. Basically, because their agreement is heavily written in their favor, I think. But they believe that they are able to continue on operating under their state certificate of franchise authority, whether they have one with us or not. So the statute also requires that we allow them peaceful entry onto our rights of way. We can have a franchise agreement. We can they can be subject to the same restrictions and requirements as any other utility service provider, but we do have to allow them in our right of way.
Okay, so a cease and desist until we get it worked out would not work.
Well, if code enforcement changes, for some reason we do more research and find out there are many other alternatives to having this particular type of structure that would be more in keeping with our code provisions for underground utilities, it may be that excavation permits could possibly be denied. But I mean, I think we probably would need a little more information on that as far as what the standard is in the industry.
Okay. In my neighborhood, on each side of my house, the house to the right of me, they left an open hole. Yes, they did put a little orange fence around it, but my dogs can knock that down. It sat there open from August to January. I complained to the city multiple times. They sent notification to them, and on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m., they sent a crew out to fill that hole. On the other side of me, I came home one day and the whole neighborhood smelled of gas. They had broken the gas main at the house next door. 24 hours later, I come home and the street's flooded and the water department's there because they broke his water line. And I understand this is happening in neighborhoods all over our ward, not just all over town, but just in our ward. So it sounds like maybe they're doing some substandard crews trying to do their work if they're not able to dodge things that are marked on the ground by Arkansas Up. I'm looking for anything that we can throw at them. And I know you love fighting with utility companies. Should be good at it. Yeah. But
Another thing I did learn today as I was spending many hours speaking with both people and researching all this is that apparently the Municipal League does offer a cable television franchise management service. And there is a representative listed on their website. And this is an area where I feel like if you have all of the expertise and know all of the right people, you're probably at a significant advantage. So I do intend to reach out and find out what the cost will be associated with that, but I think that that's probably a good alternative for us to research.
very good.
Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, basically, it almost sounds like this is still ongoing. We haven't given up in any way, so maybe we can get another update at our next meeting or whatever. And at some point, I'd ask you if it would be helpful to actually contact state reps and state senators for our area to see if they can address this at the state level, since they seem to have they think they're authorized to do things at the state level. Would that be reasonable at some point, perhaps?
I don't know how much it will help, but it won't hurt.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Tierney?
Yes, you had mentioned, Mr. Mayor, before about how people have rights on people coming to their yards, and I just wanted to kind of clarify this because I think this is something that's going to be very important to a lot of residents about just exactly what your rights are. I mean, if the city attorney could expand on that just a little bit so that when people know all of a sudden they come into their yard and they're starting to dig into a place that you don't want them to, what your rights are beyond, or is it just, give Mr. Grummer a call and that's really about all you can do?
I'm not, you're asking what people's rights are with respect to
these being installed in your yard, like they want to put it in your front yard, just, how firm can you be about, no, don't put that there?
I mean, if they're constructing it in the easement, I mean, an easement is, the utilities have rights to put their facilities in a utility
Right,
easement.
but if they get beyond the easement, they start getting in your yard, you do have the rights to say, no, this is not gonna happen. I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, if they are not in the easement, and please check with somebody before you just assume that they're not. What I would do is try to immediately get in touch with someone and send a certified letter notifying them that you're on my property and I consider it to be a trespass against my property.
Very good, that's exactly what I wanted to know, thank you.
Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yeah, it sounds like we all have a big thing and you guys are working it, but that's gonna be a mid to long-term fix. Right now, we've got a lot of marking, a lot of digging. So my biggest concern is what I'm hearing about where they're digging in the middle of a front yard by the side. Do we have any code or anything? I couldn't find anything that limits how much from a side yard they can be. So at least, because once they get dug, I'm guessing it's going to be a lot harder to undo what's been done. If it's any time new construction of these boxes, we at least contain to the side yards rather than, I mean, because I got one of those 4x4s in a side yard, which is bad enough. But if it's right smack dab in the front yard, I can see how it's going to be worse of an issue.
I would recommend if you see them installing equipment in someone's front yard to just call 851-2500 and get a hold of Scott, my office.
Sorry, Scott.
Who, I mean, that is not common. That is very uncommon.
Okay.
But uncommon things do happen, and so definitely give us a call and we'll get them in the side yard.
I drove around yesterday just on several streets, and for the most part, where I did see them was more on corners and in between houses and sort of, more easement or green space type spaces. The one on, I grant you, the one on Pin Oak Loop that was on Facebook, that was the first actual picture of that equipment that I had seen. It's terrible. It's really bad. There's no doubt.
And I have sent that up through my route, that photograph, the famous photograph, for an explanation on why, especially the bigger facilities, some of the locations that they put the bigger equipment, in my mind, doesn't make sense. And so I've asked for an explanation through a different route than we're typically communicating with them on.
Great, thanks.
Councilmember Mosley?
I think you answered the question there. I was following up from Mr. Tierney's question, was just at what point are they trespassing? I guess it's when they're out of their easement. Would that be correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
I need some clarification on the width of an easement, because I've asked 3 different people and gotten 3 different measurements. So does it vary, or?
Yes.
Okay. So what's the criteria for?
You'd look at the plats to determine what the easements were in that area.
Okay, so it could be different.
It could be
in
different
every
between 2
neighborhood.
different homes, side by side.
So it would seem to be Comcast's responsibility to know exactly the measurement of every easement along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So it's not the same everywhere.
correct.
Okay.
All right. No additional buttons. Next order of business is the procedural motion, Planning Commission report. Councilmember Mazzoni almost got off easy.
I bugged you all. Okay, so this was actually they had a pretty busy agenda. They had 7 items, 6 of which are coming to us, 5 today. So most of it will be here. Another one, I'm guessing, will be in the following meeting. So the first one, and is on our agenda, is the Osage Terrace Phase 2D. So along Maumel Valley Drive, it's going to be the last 17 houses all the way up to the our current city line will be all houses. The big thing of that is that's the magic number. So 34 houses on that regime. You can't have more without having an additional secondary access point. So since the question came up, since it's outside county line, can they then go ahead and build in it, force us to build a special access? And my understanding, Scott, make sure if I got this, is due to its not just location in the floodplain and the different scalability, the odds of we're not anticipating any more development, and the odds of that are very slim based on the geography and floodplain. So the only other, no waivers or variances are there, which I like. The only thing of note would be since it's not a turnaround, the last property is where the sanitation trucks are currently be doing their turnaround. So once that gets developed, an alternate turnaround point will have to be put in. That was about the only thing, but it should not be an issue. And that received a due pass. Conditional use permit for a lean-to structure out at the Maumel Country Club is coming to us. Basically, it's something they've been storing for a while. The lean-to is there. They didn't know I had the permit because they got it from when it transferred from Maumel Water to the previous owner to the current owner. It was there when they've got it, so they didn't realize they need a permit. They're doing it. Has a painted fence. It just stores fertilizer, sand, gravel. They might need some more landscaping to cover it up, but they were all willing to do that. Shouldn't be a big deal. The third one, this is to come to us, was an appeal of a denied permit for a structure, which was interesting because a lot of us don't know the rules of where structures can go, and especially as I found out, a lot where the contractors put them in incorrectly, don't get permits, and that could get us. So always make sure you have a permit. So this individual is going to have to move his storage facility because it was outside of current code. but there was a good follow-on. That was probably the bulk of the meeting, was actually listening and weighing the arguments both sides, which I thought was pretty good for just your average citizen coming up. The only one not on the agendas today will be the Reserve at Country Club, and that's going to be for 141 lots with 40 acres of land. There are no variances right there. It will provide the secondary access to Devo 2, which would be required, and will eventually come to us for a development plan, but I didn't see that one on the agenda. And the last few was an updated zoning map, the land use update, which is not going to be the forward-looking one, but that's just a consolidation of all the changes to date. So that's what's that ordinance. Both of those are on for today's agenda. And finally, the code amendment to Chapter 94, which is going to standardize all our notifications basically for real property. So there was a lot to that coming us for actions. It seemed pretty good, but I'm not even going to try and summarize that because you lost me in the details. But basically like everything else we're doing, we're trying to slim everything down and standardize everything across the board. And that was it.
The only thing I get from that report is that you didn't pay much attention at all. No, it was very thorough, very thorough. You don't need to attend if you have.
After missing the last one, I couldn't repeat that.
No, very thorough report. Thank you, Councilmember Mazzoni. Next item of business is the procedural motion. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So moved. Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. First item of unfinished business is the second reading of Ordinance 1036, establishing rights-of-way standards. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1036, an ordinance to establish standards and specifications to administer and regulate the right-of-way in the public interest and to provide for the issuance of regulation of the right-of-way permits.
All right, this is on second reading. If there's no discussion, it'll be on third reading at the next City Council meeting. All right, we'll move on to new business. The first item of new business is Resolution 22-12, approving a preliminary development plan. City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, a resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2022-12, approving the preliminary development plan for Osage Terrace Phase 2D.
Thank you. I am not even going to try and explain this. I think Councilmember Mazzoni gave a thorough explanation on this. Is there any discussion on Resolution 22-12? Councilmember Gardner?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-12.
I've got a motion second. We do have at least one additional comment. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that a little bit. I was at the council meeting and at the subcommittee meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about fire trucks and access and needing a secondary access. And I think, as I understand it, one of the reasons it was okayed is that there's going to be another proposed road that would come up and perhaps eventually connect through the peninsula, and I'm not sure how that would work. Am I correct in what I heard?
Mr. Grummer?
Scott Grummer, 550 Edgewood Drive. Councilmember Mosley, so that's correct. This will end at the boundary of the city. The fire code only allows up to 30 units on an extended, but the fire marshal can make an exception in certain situations. So this was an exception up to 34, but there's no additional extension. So the applicant did state that they have a future development on the peninsula that they've been trying to do for many years, that they have certain entitlements that have already been provided by the city years ago concerning that. So to do that, they will have to provide a secondary access for that peninsula. But the peninsula development would actually access through Maumel Valley Drive through this subdivision.
Okay, I was actually worried about this subdivision. It won't need a secondary exit?
No, sir. And to correct Councilmember Mazzoni's comments, it's not floodplain that's down there, it's actually floodway, which is very, you have to get Corps of Engineer approval to develop down there, which would be tough. So that's correct. There will not be any additional secondary access for this subdivision that you're approving tonight.
Okay, they just made an exception then on this deal.
Just for 4 additional houses.
Okay.
Because the applicant has gotten the appropriate entitlements for easement, access easement for the secondary access for the peninsula. So they've done quite a few other things in the past in order to set that up in the future.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. We do also have applicant or applicant's representative. I'm not sure if y'all wanted to say something or just be available if there were any questions. Wanted to give you the option to speak if you wanted to. You don't have to.
No, thank you. I'll brief. If there's any questions, my name is Tim Daters. I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2022-12 say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next order of business is Resolution 22-13, approving a preliminary development plan. City Clerk Timmons, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas. A resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2022-13, approving the preliminary development plan for the Reserve at Country Club.
All right. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions about the subdivision and the walking trails. The walking trails, as I understand it, that would go along the bayou would be connected into one that's already there that comes through another neighborhood up there, and I'm suddenly just drawing a blank on that one there. And would that extension there be public all the way up to the north end of that?
Yes, sir. So the trails along the bayou would be dedicated to the city of Maumel and connect to the existing trail system that connects to the softball parks. But it would go up to the very northern part of this development, and then the connection to the adjacent development, which is DeVoe Bend Phase 2. That's a private development, so they have an actual trail system that cuts and goes straight south to continue the pathway around the private development of DeVoe Bend.
Okay, so the public part would end at the northernmost point, and then as it curves and goes south, it becomes private at that point?
That's correct. It'd be POA maintained as it curves and goes south.
All right, is that a lake in the dead center of that subdivision? Is that what that is?
It's retention meant for drainage, but it is a lake, yes, sir.
Okay, and yeah, there was a lot of discussion about fire access again, and it looks like, and I think they had no problem with the roundabouts and the cul-de-sacs and all that stuff. And there appears to be ample space for it to go into the DeVoe, which would give them a secondary access for fire. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All righty. All right, thank you.
We also have the applicant and applicant's representative here as well, if y'all have any questions for them. Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-13.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is adoption of Resolution 2022-13. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next order of business is Resolution 22-15, approving a conditional use permit for Maumel Country Club. City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumel, Pulaski County, Arkansas, Resolution number 2022-15, a resolution granting a conditional use permit for a lean-to-style structure in an open space zoning district.
Councilmember Mazzoni.
Motion to approve.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, I went out there with critical eye a couple of times and actually took my wife with me to make sure I viewed it the same way somebody else would. And it does not look too bad the way it is, in my opinion, and I think if they add the trees, that'll make it nice. I think I've used pine trees for a little buffer in my yard, and it seems to work very well. They grow fast and they spread out to begin with, and they would hide a lot of that fence, and then I guess as they grow, they look good too. But I think that would be great if they'd go ahead and put those pine trees in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Holt.
This is an open space, right? Official open space. So heretofore, until we approved another use of an open space in the country club, it was not to be used. Is this specifically being requested by the country club?
Yes, it is. It is an area where they have some storage, and they've stored some things for quite some time. The lean-to just protects some of the materials from the weather. Do we have an applicant from the club that would like to maybe explain that a little bit better than I have? If we get a name and address for the record, sir.
Hi, I'm Terry Roush, and I live at 4 Fairway Woods Circle.
Right.
Yeah, the structure basically sits in the old bunkers that we use as storage facilities today.
Right.
The lean-to is just sitting outside of one of those storage facilities, and so we put up a fence, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago as a buffer initially, but there's maintenance equipment and that we're just trying to protect. Right. So we moved that lean-to inside the fence line there, put it up against the bunker, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is just protect the equipment that's in there.
Right. Well, if it's being requested by their country club, and that's what y'all want with it, that's what I want, but I just want to make sure that was with your total approval. And request.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. We did have a motion, I believe. Did we have a second? Yes, sir. Okay. Who was the second? Who was the motion? Okay. Any additional discussion on resolution 22-15? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and convene the Board of Sign Appeals. Now that y'all have magically transformed into the Board of Sign Appeals, we are requesting a sign variance hearing be held at the next City Council meeting on April 18th, 2022. This is for the Splash Car Wash. Y'all recently, we heard a very similar request from the oil and lube facility right in front of it. Councilmember Gardner?
I will make a motion to approve the request for a sign variance hearing at the next council meeting. Second.
All right, we have a motion to hold a sign variance hearing at the next City Council meeting. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes. Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. I will now adjourn the Board of Sign Appeals and reintroduce the Maumel City Council to y'all. Next item of business is going to be a good one, but I'm biased. It's a presentation on the food truck and farmers market park. I've asked my Chief of Staff, Sarah Smith, to give y'all the presentation.
Good evening. I get the fun part. You know, I think it's nights like these when I'm reminded of just what a great community that we have, and just as evidenced by the demonstration of just how people care about this city. They care about keeping it beautiful. They care about making sure that things are safe for everyone. And I think too, like when we get together, when we band together, we can see how strong a voice we have as a community. So with that in mind, I want to just direct your attention to a property that we have at the corner of Millwood and the Boulevard. You may know this property well. It's currently vacant, our old municipal building, courthouse / firehouse. And I imagine, like me, you've often heard of ideas of what we could do here with this property. You may have some ideas yourself. And I think all of us would agree that there's a lot of potential here for lots of different things. There's lots of good things that could go there. And I want to propose to you an idea for this space that checks a lot of boxes that I think could reach a really full potential of this space. One that focuses on community, focuses on creating a place where people want to gather, people want to be together, a place that benefits and enhances our connectivity, something that could connect to different areas of our city, and especially the amenities and the options that we have kind of around our city center in a really cohesive way. And then third, something that really promotes our commerce. And that's something that we talk about a lot here, about wanting to do some things that really enhance and grow our commercial and our retail revenue. I think this space is one that could do that and has a lot of potential for that. And so I want to propose to you the idea of putting a food truck park and farmers market pavilion with this space. This would be a space that's specifically designed for the safe and successful operation of food trucks and pop-up retailers. This would have, this is just a conceptual drawing of what it could look like, and just so that you could see that something like this could fit on this space that we have. And I know Dave Roberts of Craft and Toll kind of introduced this idea at our last council meeting and looking at the property that we already have, that this is owned by the city of Maumel. But this space could have on-site parking, the adjacent bicycle and walking paths that you can see there that go up to Club Manor. You put restroom facilities, dining spaces that could complete the park, that would create a venue for lots of community events, festivals, farmers market. You could have daily food truck operations for additional dining in Maumel. And if you're like me, you know you've witnessed the rise of the food trucks, and particularly on our north and our southern end, where often we have to go actually outside the city limits to go to those food trucks. But they're becoming more and more popular with our residents. This area is really in close proximity to the center of Maumel. You think about Lake Willestein, the library, the recently completed splash pad, more, which would really create endless opportunities for family outings, for get-togethers with friends, where it's not just going to one place, but it's really going to the area in our city center and really enjoying multiple things and multiple options. And really the combinations are endless. I wanted to show you a little bit about like what's actually in that close proximity to the city center. You can see in the middle, that yellow dot, that's the corner of Millwood and the Boulevard. And the circle is approximately a mile. It's actually a little bit less than a mile, but that's everything that's within a mile radius of that property. If you're like me, you're kind of surprised to find how many things are there. Like within a mile radius of that property, Lake Willestein, the Center on the Lake, Splash Pad, that future all-inclusive playground that we've been talking about, our public library, the community center with our pool and the skate park, our middle school, Maumel Charter, Pine Forest Elementary are also within a mile. And we have 14 retail businesses currently within a mile radius. We have 21 restaurants. And we have at least 10 parcels of undeveloped commercial property that are all within that circle. Now, I want to talk about food truck parks and just the small businesses in particular. And I know that you've noticed, as with all businesses, we've got our economy has been shifting, especially with the pandemic. Recent technological advancements have really required food truck owners, restaurateurs, everybody's had to adapt and diversify, and I think that's part of why this is becoming a more and more commonplace thing to see small businesses and startups and food trucks really start to grow. But these small businesses offer a huge potential to our retail and commercial. In the U.S. Small Business Administration in 2020 came out with some statistics for our small businesses, and they actually employ 47.1% of our employees in the entire United States. This also accounts for 65.1% of the net new job creation since 2000. So there's a lot of potential here. Small businesses are going to be vital to our economic future. So creating spaces and ways to support and equip and provide avenues for their success in our community is going to be important as well. Let's see here. I want you to think about this area too, how highly visible and centrally located that particular corner is to our city. So think about how accessible this area is for not only for our traffic, our cars that drive through our city and drive to and from work and home, but also cyclists and pedestrian traffic. This area could truly be a hub for that commercial space and also the recreational space that we have there. So connecting these areas together will create opportunities for just the experience. And you may have heard about that, about, with so many retail businesses going online, there's so much that you can do shopping online, which is great. But when you want to go out and actually be in person, it's about the experience. So us creating experiences for businesses will promote those businesses coming. They also promote our residents and maybe even the community at large to come in and shop and eat and just enjoy a day in Maumel. We've got some other factors too, and at our last council meeting, Dave Roberts introduced the regional greenway and the plans for Metro Plan to drive that greenway and build it all the way through Maumel, and in particular through Club Manor. So if you think about that greenway, will go right through this corner, which also offers some opportunities for people to have a trailhead right there. So you might have families that want to take a little bike, a day trip on their bikes to come and park their car here in Maumel and start their journey, which also means they'll probably eat here and maybe enjoy our parks. And then also the Club Manor corridor that you heard about last time, and how this would serve kind of as a gateway or an entrance into that city center, into that commercial district that we have. So I wanted to show you a little bit about what this could look like, and these are a few examples of some food truck parks. And they're all over the place. It's not hard to find food truck parks in different cities, and there's some even locally, real close by. But these three in particular are in cities that are really they're in similar size. The population is very similar to Maumel. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit about those. So we've got the Little Fleet. That's that's located in Traverse City, Michigan. It's been in operation since 2015, so it's doing very well. It's successful. Today, this park features 6 different food trucks each night. It has an open air covered dining space. It has weekend live events. Just really a fun atmosphere that they've created up there, and they actually kind of closed down in the winter and are still able to successfully operate it with just a seasonal operation. This one, 403 Eats, is in Tomball, Texas, which is a population of about 11,000. Their mayor actually operates this one as a small business, and their goal was just to create a family environment. No, not you? Okay, just a thought. It was to create a family environment. They wanted to create a space where people and residents could come and enjoy, spending time together, even your dog. So they've had proposals and weddings. They've had first dates, blind dates, birthdays. They play bingo, have live music, sing karaoke. So just a lot of fun and creating that community atmosphere in their town. And then the last one I wanted to show you is the Soho Food Truck Park. This one is in Holiday, Utah. They have a population of about 30,000, so a little bit larger than us. But just really looking at how these food trucks in these particular cities have demonstrated that they're sustainable, they work, people like them, and they bring economic and social benefits to communities. So these kinds of businesses, food trucks, pop-up retails, they will continue to play an important role in our economy. This property, though, in particular, presents the city of Maumel with an opportunity to respond to these industry changes, to support and promote local small business developers, to catalyze the growth of our commercial center, and to enhance the existing amenities that we have. The development of this outdoor commerce food truck park will position Maumel for a bright future, and I think it will contribute to the enduring vision of our wonderful city.
Thank you. Just one thing, yeah, round of applause. No, one thing I'd really quickly mention, we saw a conceptual drawing that Craft and Toll folks put together. That was put together basically just to see what sort of stuff could fit. There was very little input given and zero feedback. It was just, does this fit on this area and could it serve as a gateway there? So I almost hesitated last meeting when Dave Roberts was going to include that picture. I almost hesitated and said, don't include it, lest someone think that we've designed it or that's what it's going to look like. And so thank you, Sarah, for showing a lot of different pictures of some of the conceptual stuff. Obviously, if we went forward with this, I think we'd want Maumel's version of this, so that someday in some city council meeting or community meeting, someone would pull up our website with that section, say, well, and look how Maumel's done it, different than other folks. Anyways, does anyone have any questions, discussion at this point? Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, that's a neat concept. I like it. I would hope that maybe there's even a way to put the ability to have a little bit of music maybe on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening,
sure.
where musicians could come and play or something like that, and that would really be cool. I don't know how far into the night you could go without the mosquitoes getting you around here, but that would be cool. I started to ask about, is there room for like a bandstand, but I don't know if.
Well, I think that's one of the things is this is just a very, this idea is at its very beginning stages. And so
Okay.
definitely looking at getting public input, because we want this to be Maumel's food truck park. We don't want it to be, Holiday Utah's or, Townball, Texas. We want to really look at, what the community, and we've seen the community has a strong and powerful voice that I think deserves a place in the development of this. So yeah, absolutely. I think those are good ideas that are possibilities here.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things also is it's food truck and farmers market is the original concept. I think if you get the right folks in a room thinking, who knows what it ends up being. You think of what farmers market is, well, some folks hold craft fairs or little meeting places out there. It's designed to be a community place, and we've kind of started from this platform, but I think for the success of this area to be more than just something that sounds cool, it is necessary that you really engage and involve the public and the community to come together and decide what it is. And then who knows, maybe it ends up a bandstand or there's numerous different ways that it could look, which is why I kind of hesitated to even show that one conceptual drawing at that point. Any additional questions, comments? Councilmember Holt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud to see that it's only $300,000 that we're going to appropriate. That's a small amount. We've got plenty of money to handle that just fine. Won't be a big deal. But I understand in the paragraph before that.
Well, if I could just, Councilmember Holt, so the next resolution is the resolution to fund the engineering of the Club Manor corridor. We don't have anything requesting funding to get started with the Gateway Park at this point.
the paragraph before said that we're understanding that additional funds will be needed. Any idea of how much additional funds?
So you're not talking about the park, right? If you're moving
Right,
on to the.
it's in, here in this motion, yes, sir.
No, sir. So, the presentation we just heard was for kind of what we're calling the City Center Park or Gateway Park. That would be where the police and courts building. That's a separate project from the one that we're gonna talk about in the next resolution.
Okay.
Any, additional, discussion? All right, thank you, Sarah. I'm sure I assure you, we will be hearing more about this in the future. With that, the next item on the agenda is Resolution 2022-14. Clerk Timmons, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas. A resolution to be entitled Resolution 2022-14. A resolution adopting project expenses for the Club Manor corridor from the American Rescue Plan Act funds and for other purposes.
All right, so at the last council meeting, we heard the presentation from Dave Roberts on the conclusion of the Club Manor corridor study. And that, I understand why it could be confusing, is the idea is hopefully we get both projects, one, the Club Manor corridor, and then separately the food truck park and farmers market pavilion. And those segue and work really well with each other, but they don't, you can do one without the other. I think both can be successful on their own merits. So what we're looking at is the council funded and we conducted a study of what to do with Club Manor there. And we'd like to go ahead and start the engineering on that process. And so Resolution 22-14 appropriates $300,000 from the ARPA funds. And for those that aren't familiar, just as a refresher, the ARPA funds were funds that we received from the federal government to deal with COVID-19 and to aid in various efforts to improve health and wellness to communities, residents, businesses in the area. So is there any discussion on this resolution? Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, sir. Might need a little bit of help here as far as, I watched the last council meeting, so I heard about the corridor and everything. And I had a couple of follow-up questions from that. Do we have any idea, do you have any ballpark idea of how much this might cost? How much of these ARPA funds we might be using?
Well, for the ARPA funds, it would be the $300,000. We'd ask for $300,000 for the engineering, landscape architecture, construction admin, et cetera. For the project itself, would probably come in between $2 to $3 million. It really depends. I've heard the same engineers give rough estimates. We haven't engaged an engineer at that level that would really go out and assess the costs. The goal for that money, it's not the only way that it could be funded, but the goal for that money is to apply for various grants. And y'all will recall we've talked about this a whole lot. We've got the regional greenway slated to come down and go right down that road. And we think that especially if we can get out in front of our competitor, brother, sisters, and municipalities, that it would kind of get us at the start of that line, and the goal would be to engineer this in such a way that it checks a ton of the boxes and makes it a very enticing grant project through MetroPlan or even the state. But 2 to 3 million is early estimates.
And that would, and then, so if we got some grants, it would reduce that amount?
Yes, the goal would be to get a grant. I mean, the goal would be a 100% grant, but that's not very realistic. We'd likely be looking at an 80% grant.
Oh, wow.
With the city paying 20%. So 20% of that number.
So
but again, that's a big range there to work with. In my experience, I'm not sure if we have any engineers in the audience or watching. In my experience, the cost may come in above that. Nonetheless, before we commit any extra funds, we'll have a better cost estimate, which is hopefully more accurate than the early estimate right now.
Okay. That ARPA money, could it be used for like splash pads and things like that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
In fact, we used the ARPA funds for or appropriated $300,000 at the last council meeting from ARPA funds for the all-inclusive playground there.
Right, right. I was just thinking if we ended up having some left over, that might, you could massage that into some other little projects for the food truck park and
Certainly.
stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so I'll come at the next city council meeting, as the goal is to come back with some money for engineering, and more than engineering with the food truck farmers market park is you want planning in engineering. We want a community engagement process. Think of the strategic plan that we put in. Obviously, this would be scaled down and site specific, but that sort of community engagement process to help design that. I think that project, depending on, you can't give cost estimates when you don't even fully have a plan for that, for the actual construction, but I think the construction of that will fit well within ARPA funds, not only in the engineering and planning, but in the construction, especially if there's not a whole lot of structures, but it's more civil engineering, electrical, concrete, asphalt, trees, decor. I think that'll come in well within ARPA fund budget possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion on 22-14? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adopt resolution 22-14. I've got a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you all. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the first reading of Ordinance 1059, amending the Maumel Land Use Plan. Clerk Timmons, if you could please read that by title only.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1059, an ordinance updating the Maumel Land Use Plan and Map, and for other purposes.
All right, so this is an updated land use plan map. There are no substantive changes. Literally, all we're doing is updating the map itself with the changes that have already been approved from the City Council. Going forward, now that Mr. Grummer and his department have the ability to make these maps in-house, the goal is every time we amend the land use map or the zoning map, we're actually amending and adopting a land use map. What that does is it gives us the ability to post on the website and get out to the public real-time, accurate maps, as opposed to the way that we used to do it before we had the technology and skills to do it. Was we had to wait several years, go to MetroPlan, have them compile everything, do all the GIS, create the maps, bring it back and adopt it. However, since we haven't started that process, this map would catch us up to right now, I believe, and then going forward, it would just be updated every time we pass the ordinance. First reading, Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, just for public's edification, as I understand it, and I think the public probably understands this too, is that nothing on this map or the zoning map changes without city council approval.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. And so when we're talking about updating the map, it'll be with the ordinance that comes back before the city council.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting. Next order of business is the first reading of Ordinance 1060, amending the Maumel zoning map. Clerk Timmons, if you could please read that by title only.
Sorry. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance 1060, an ordinance updating the Maumel zoning map and for other purposes.
All right, this same concept as the previous ordinance, except this one is for the zoning map and not the land use map. Is there any discussion on ordinance 1060? Councilmember Mosley?
I just wanted to see what some of these items were. I was really studying this, especially the peninsula area and that sort of thing. There's an area on this map that is there at the very far left that is kind of, it's gray. Is that supposed to be water? And I'm assuming that's, I'm not sure what that specifies there, but is that what that specifies? Is that water?
That layer there?
Yeah. The gray layer between the green and then the bottom area of Osage Falls.
Mr. Grummer?
I don't know what that is. But I can guarantee you that we'll find out exactly what it is, and if it isn't supposed to be there, it'll be taken off.
Okay.
Is it floodway on the key?
No, well, so actually, it could be floodway tied to, when you look at the actual river floodway is shown in there in the same color. There are areas, there are areas that fall through here that are actual floodway.
I suspect it's a layer that shouldn't be there. So when you build the GIS, there's a whole bunch of layers. The zoning color is actually the color underneath it. So for the green that's underneath that lake-like issue, it's open space, and then the area above it is the appropriate zoning.
Okay.
We'll double check that and have that for you. And I suspect.
And let me ask you, as long as you're up here, then you go down from there, you go down on the peninsula, there's some yellow, and that's residential part of the peninsula. Then to the right of that, it's marked floodway. Now, is that land or is that the Rector Chute? Or both?
Well, so you would have Rector Chute in there, but then there's also the peninsula land. So the areas that are designated floodway are actually in the floodway, and the areas that are designated R1 was the zoning that was already there for residential.
Okay, now as I understand it too, there's some park, which would be open space. I guess it's actually owned by the city of Maumel that is between the residential and the water. Am I correct on that?
There is a land for a city park. We can look at what that zoning category is supposed to be.
Okay, and it's actually.
And I don't
owned
mean
by
to interrupt for Mr. Grummer. I just have a feeling.
Yeah.
It's owned by the city, I would assume.
I'd have to look and see what parcel that you're talking about.
Okay, because I think that was part of the bottom line settlement is we got some land that could be used as a park, but it's in the floodway, so I mean, you wouldn't really probably ever use it,
But that would come up whenever we review any proposed plat for the.
Do we need to table this until we find out exactly what that gray is, or any of these other questions?
The council's welcome to. We can run it at the second reading at the next meeting. It'll be here, and if we have to amend it.
Oh, that is a kind of an ordinance. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Is there any additional discussion on ordinance 1060? Seeing none, we will move on to ordinance 1061, amending chapter 94 of the zoning regulations. Clerk Timmons, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumel, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1061, an ordinance amending multiple sections of the Maumel City Code to change the methods of notification of real property use changes and for other purposes.
Thank you. This was an ordinance that I believe was inspired by Scott and Jason in planning and permits. The primary purpose of this ordinance is to standardize some of the notification requirements for in the zoning code, as well as to ensure that we're giving the proper notice to people who would be affected by these land use issues. Is there any discussion on ordinance 1061? All right, if there's none, it'll be on second reading at the next city council meeting. And we will move on to council member comments. Councilmember Gardner?
There is a meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. At the community center regarding White Oak Bayou. Some students and staff from UCA have done a study and some things regarding White Oak Bayou. And so it'll be interesting to developers. I know there'll be several developers in attendance learning about the bayou and how to work around that and manage it better and leave it a better place. So if you're interested in attending, is that right, Scott? It's 4 p.m. in South Room, I presume? Yeah, South Room of the community center tomorrow.
And thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Gardner. To be clear, it would be helpful and informative, not just to developers, but also to residents and anyone who's just interested in the bayou and to check that out. Thank you for that. Any additional council member comments? Councilmember Tierney?
Yes, as Councilmember Mosley had mentioned earlier about the ARPA money that could be used for other community projects, another project that we might want to consider is something that had been kicked around once by the previous councils about an indoor community swimming pool. There was an area that was mapped out by the senior center. The utility stubs have already been run and put in place. The director of Vogler, she's already certified to be able to manage such a place. And I've had discussions with her about how they would react if we were to build something like that, but make it available to the rest of the community, not just the seniors. And she was very receptive. She said that'd be a great idea. It would, not put more of a burden on, the other regular city park services like that. So I thought that might be something we might want to consider as we move into trying to develop that corridor into a community center area. I mean, a pool in the winter is something I think our community could really use.
Thank you, sir. Any additional council member comments? Seeing none, city attorney comments?
No comments.
City clerk comments?
No comments.
All right, at this time, if there's nothing further, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no.